Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our session on responsible intelligence with Supply Chain Sustainability School. We are really excited to have you here today. Today's agenda is quite fascinating. Many of the sessions you may have attended in the past have focused on AI itself or the models around AI, which is, of course, important. But today we are flipping the coin. We will be talking about the real story, how humans and AI can work together effectively, responsibly, and collaboratively. And to explore this topic, we have three industry speakers joining us today along with myself. And with that, let's begin and let's dive in on this topic of responsible AI. Before we get started, just a few quick housekeeping rules. We will share the slides and poll results after the session. Everyone's microphone has been muted to minimize background noise. And of course, please feel free to use the Q&A features to post your questions to specific speakers. We and our team and our speakers will do their best to address as many questions as possible. So please raise your questions, put them in the Q&A function, and we will respond on them. So please sit back, relax, and let's get started on our journey into responsible AI. I'm Vishali Bed. I'm the principal consultant in social value and sustainable procurement with Action Sustainability and the Supply Chain Sustainability School. I have over 17 years of experience leading procurement transformation across FTSE 100 companies, and I specialize in, translating sustainability ambitions into practical, measurable supply chain action. And particularly, I'm interested in how responsible AI can enhance procurement strategies, driving smarter, more responsible, and more transparent supply chain decisions. So, what you see on the screen today is human to human collaboration and moving from that aspect to human AI collaboration. That is the theme for today's discussion. And let me bring this image to life for you. What you see here is not a human versus machine story. I think it's a human with machine story. On the left, we have a leader calm, focused, intentional around their objectives and purpose. And on the right, what you see a humanoid AI system. They are side by side, equal height, same line of sight. That is the future. They are not competing with each other, they are collaborating with each other. And the glowing networks around them, that's our real story, the complexity, our modern business challenges, our global supply chain disruptions, constant market shifts, and I think massive flow of data. They are everywhere. The truth is, neither of them can handle this alone. It's not human versus AI story, it's human and AI story. So, what does each bring to the table? Think about the humans. The human brings judgment, they bring the context, they bring collaborative approach, ethics, strategic thinking at a certain points, and creativity, which is our strength. The AI can bring speed, scale, and analytical power. And the interaction layer that you see here is how humans and AI communicate. This is what mostly in the AI sessions we discuss about the AI models, LLM systems, and so on. But our focus is around governance today, the most critical layer. And I think any leading businesses in the world who are thinking about adopting AI systems, they need to think about governance. And that will be a kind of a differentiation in this business world who are thinking about AI. We can have, honestly, the smartest of smartest AI and the best human decision makers. But without the right governance, putting ethics into practice and accountability, we risk mistakes or biased outcomes. And to be honest, the research that I have done in the space of AI, it tells me that AIs often learn from historical data, right? Because AI models are made out of those historical data, and history is not perfect. It carries its own biases, its own challenges. So, without governance, I think AI can make the best decisions, but with our support, with a better governance system, we will be able to have a human AI collaboration. Otherwise, what we think we will end up is in the same societal challenges, in the same inequalities that have persisted for years. And that's why responsible AI is the future, and it's not an option anymore. If you are thinking about AI and digital solutions, you need to think about responsible AI, because human AI collaboration will truly actually amplify people rather than amplifying our societal and existing challenges and problems. And that's what we are going to explore today with our three industry speakers. Before we start our speaker session, we will be using Menti. It's an interactive tool, and we will be asking our participants a few questions around AI and where they are in this journey of AI. So let's go on menti.com. Please enter the code that you can see on your screen, or you can scan the QR code as well. And I will ask my colleague Alice to please share the Menti screen, please. So if you are here on menti.com, uh, please log in looking at the code, and you can also scan the QR code that you see on your screen. Let's join this interactive exercise. And it's Menti is an anonymous platform. You will or we will not come to know who is entering what. So it's anonymous. So please feel free to, share your insights, what and where you are in this journey of AI. We will give a minute for everyone to join the Menti exercise. We can see we have 197, 198 participants. AI is a journey, so we need to take this journey together. So please join this exercise and let us know what you are thinking about AI. We can still see participants joining, so maybe 10 more seconds and then we will start this exercise. Again, for the benefit of everyone, you can see the code on your screen, and I'm sure my colleague, she might have posted the code and the QR code in the chat function as well. So please join this discussion. Okay, let's start with the first question. How would you describe your organization's current use of AI? No AI use within your organization as of now. You are experimenting with AI in some processes and some systems, or AI has become core to your operations. Where we are in this journey of AI. Interesting. It looks like we have a clear winner between experimenting with AI and AI in some processes. Maybe we will give a moment more just to see if there are any other different views over here. Brilliant. We do have organizations for whom AI has become core to their operations, to their products, and so on. And of course, a few are on this journey around understanding AI and what AI can bring within their organization. Any more responses here before we move forward? Okay, let's move on to the next question, which is more about which areas do you see the most potential for AI human collaboration? Is it the customer service elements, data analysis, where you are dealing with massive data sets, product development, or operations supply chain side of things? Where do you see the most potential solutions or experimenting around AI? Which area, which department will it be? Interesting. I think one business case of using AI specifically in different AI models, and of course, we are talking about agentic AI nowadays, it's around the data analysis, how we can work around those massive data sets using those repetitive patterns, using that information, and how AI can give us more information. So data analysis will be a kind of at the front of where we see a business case for AI. And second one is, though not with majority of the votes here, operations and supply chain. Again, if we think about procurement and supply chain within our businesses, we are dealing with data, we are dealing with supply chain disruptions and global supply chain, which again makes a good business case for using AI and AI-based solutions. On to the next question, please. Now let's rank where humans add the most value in AI collaboration. Is it the judgment under uncertainty, ethics, accountability, creativity, relationship management? It may be the internal relations, relations with your investors, relation with your supply chain and suppliers, or contextual understanding. We understand the context really well. So, where do you think, as humans, we can add the most value in this narrative around human and AI collaboration? Interesting again. Of course, we are thinking about ethics and accountability. We are thinking about the people aspect, the responsible side of AI. We are thinking about contextual understanding, which is still, a major part of our work. s- there are certain things which can't be copied and pasted and looked around AI, but still contextual understanding, the cultural aspect, how we deal with people, how we actually understand our investors and supply chains and so on, that understanding still sits with us. And I think, rightly put, we are thinking about ethics and accountability, which is a major, major driver how humans can contribute around this collaboration, and thinking about contextual and relationship management. Really great feedback over here. Moving on to the next question. Now, think about what will happen in 3 years. Of course, we are not talking about, next 5 years, because things are changing, things are evolving. Let's just think about 3 years from now. Our supply chain will be still mostly manual, or will it be human led with AI support, AI driven with human oversight? fully integrated with the digital ecosystem, or it will be highly autonomous? Where do you see our supply chains moving in this direction, in this journey of AI? Thinking again about the human AI collaboration. During the session today, whenever we will use the term AI, it will always, point towards the responsible AI. It will point towards the human AI collaboration. So in 3 years, where do you see our supply chain heading towards? Interesting. Human led with AI support. Uh, and of course, when we talk about supply chains and procurement, we are thinking about those data sets. We are thinking about maybe your spend data, your procurement data, and how the AI models can really support this journey around data analysis. And to be honest, we all have seen within supply chain, this has been the biggest barrier for supply chains to progress to the next level. And I think it's again about that collaborative approach that we can bring. We can use AI for our benefit, for data analysis, for recognizing the patterns, giving them repetitive work, and so on. That is where human led with AI support will really work within the supply chain and procurement world. Anything else? The second one is AI driven with human oversight. Uh, it's a far-sighted kind of a thing. And of course, there have been progress around these elements using specifically within supply chain and category management and so on. But there are limited success stories at this point. But things can change within next 6 months, 9 months. We will see more AI driven management around certain products and certain categories. Of course, it's mostly manual at this point, but it's an AI disruption, and we never know when we will see technology and automation taking place within our procurement and supply chain. And I think interestingly, what we have seen working on different client projects, a lot of supply chain professionals, they don't realize that where AI has been used there. If you are using certain tool providers, you are using risk management tools, they are all using AI models to back the information, to provide you those kind of information. So AI has entered in our world, but in which form, in what format, we are still, exploring those kind of elements. And of course, then thinking about highly autonomous and fully integrated digital solution. Amazing. Thank you so much for your responses here. And that's what we our let's go on our next question, please. So the next question is, we have discussed now about AI, what's happening in our organizations and so on. And there is a big piece around upskilling our own employees, upskilling, people around us around AI. But no one is explaining what these skills really look like. Are we talking about building AI models? Are we, talking about LLMs and things like that? Or are we really talking about human AI collaboration? So, according to you, what capability must leaders develop to thrive in a human AI enabled future? What we really mean by capability and what kind of capability our leaders should develop to thrive in a human AI enabled future? Think about what are the skills we all need in this journey around human AI collaboration. I know there are a lot of questions that how AI will be used, what it can impact and how it can impact. But we also need to think about what capabilities we can, develop, we can upskill ourselves to thrive in this relationship with AI. Can we just quickly scroll down through the results that just to glimpse through what people are thinking in this direction? Of course, creativity, governance, leadership, strategy, AI competency, curation, authenticity, oversight, flexibility, responsibility, IT skills, using AI in our space, data collection, critical thinking, critical skills, data literacy, critical thinking. I think it's a relevant and much needed capability that we all need to develop around AI aspects specifically. Environmental impact awareness, very rightly put. I think we need to not just think about progress, which is an important element, but we need to think about people, planet, and progress, which will take us in a better position. So, whenever we think about digital solutions and AI, we are moving towards that progressive world. But let's not forget within this equation, people and planet aspect of things. Change management, again, an important aspect over here. What else? Behavior, behavioral aspects, behavioral management. Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing your inputs, sharing your insights on your journey around AI. Now it's time to go back to our slides, and now let's discuss with our industry speakers what's happening in the field of responsible AI. Now, let's start with our first guest speaker, Julie Adamson. She's head of social value, UK and Ireland at Ethos. And Julia, over to you, please.
Thank you for having
Ju-
me. Yes, so I head up social value at Atos, and it's probably good to say that I'm not a technical expert or developer in AI. I am someone that works in a digital business that utilizes and creates services around AI, and I lead their social value program. So the talk that I'm going to run today is more around the intersection of those two topics and not necessarily a deep dive into the technicalities of AI and responsible AI, but how, as responsible businesses, we should be looking at it. So, on that, what is AI? Apologies for all of those that put that your businesses are fully adopting AI and you're probably very expert in it. But for those of us that sort of are still sort of trying to understand what it actually means, AI systems are designed to perform tasks that historically or typically required human intelligence, such as pattern recognition, sort of opaque decision making, understanding language, and generating content. But there are a variety of AI systems, and the distinction matters when we talk about it because they all have slightly different benefits, risks, and impacts. So, narrow AI is something that's built for a specific task. It can outperform humans in that task, but it can't generalize beyond that. So, think of your Netflix recommendations or chess engines or voice assistants. It definitely saves time through automation, empowering automation. It reduces errors, but it also can encode bias from training data, and it shouldn't be used to decide and make decisions in really high stakes domains because it's really opaque in the way that it makes those decisions. So we shouldn't be using it in deciding how we hire people, lend money, create sentencing and justice, for example. Then we have machine learning. Sorry, still on the slide. Yeah. this is a subset of AI where systems learn patterns from data, and the more data, the better its performance. It's fantastic in creating breakthroughs in medical diagnostics, climate modeling, drug discoveries, but it also requires huge, massive data sets. And again, it can perpetuate historical inequalities if it's trained on biased data. Then we've got deep learning and neural networks, sort of mimicking the way that our brains work by having artificial neuron processes, and looking at processing information to recognize really complex patterns in images, speech, and text. Again, fantastic for things like early cancer detection, improving assistive technologies through things like real-time captioning, and accelerating scientific research. But again, there's issues and risks around it where there is something called the black box problem, where even the designers can't fully explain how some of the decisions are made, and it has really high energy and computing costs. Then we've got generative AI. I'm sure we've all heard of that one. That's things like ChatGPT and Claude. It's trained on human created content, and it produces new outputs on demand. And it can and should democratize access to information, research, and education. However, there's also the risks around misinformation, rising issues around things like content creation around deep fakes and harmful imagery. And there is a question around copyright and who owns the outputs of it when it's been trained on historical data that people have independently created. And then the final one that I'll cover is general AI or intelligent AI or AGI. That one doesn't exist yet. It's still being a long-term research goal. Its goal, I think, is to look at how we can solve huge humanitarian problems and mimic human cognition across a variety of tasks. However, there is obviously then the concerns around control, alignment to human value, and societal disruption. So the point of this is to sort of showcase that when we talk about AI, there are different kinds. They all have different purposes. Some are much more consumer-facing tools, which will have a different risk to things that internal systems like an HR chatbot that will help you find a policy at work. So when we talk about AI, we should consider which sort of kinds we mean and what those impacts might be. So if we can move on to the next slide, please. So in terms of its impact for the economy, for example, overall, the forecast is broadly positive. There's set to be and projected to be an addition of £232 billion to the UK economy because of AI by 2030. And when we look at disruption and displacement of jobs, there are old and new figures around it, but the projection originally was that there would be 85 million jobs worldwide that would get displaced, but more than 97 million created. So we will still see a net gain of employment and opportunity based on the projection of AI. We're seeing this play out. We know that in the UK, there's been an 85% increase in the number of AI companies operating in the UK, and more than 86,000 people are employed in that sector. But throughout that shift that we're living in at present, the composition of the economy is changing, and those changes are not necessarily evenly spread. So we know that certain roles and sectors are more vulnerable, and certain age groups and career stages are also. So in Atos, for example, we've declined some of the demand for certain developer roles, because we know that we can use AI to more accurately and efficiently create the same code. However, we also know that there is more opportunity and need for people to critically assess and test the programs that we can use less people for. So we're building demand in testing and architecture roles. More broadly, we are seeing a decline in some graduate level roles and junior entry level positions in some of the historical big employers in London, for example, like in banking and in law. And there was always that historical employment model that looked more like a pyramid, where there's a really high demand for junior employees and it teetered off towards the top. We're more likely to see that narrow a bit. People had talked about the diamond employment model, and they don't think that that will be the case, because we want to make sure we continue to build a talent pipeline of junior people. However, as that composition changes and as new roles are being created, it will impact the way that we employ and build capability across different sectors. Um, but more positively, we know that as AI tools develop, previously really high barrier technical work might become more accessible. AI can now accelerate lower skilled workers' development much faster than was previously possible. We've also seen a shift in the geographic concentration of AI. So historically, there was more than 75% of AI companies based in London, the southeast, and the east of England. Since the government's AI action plan, the introduction of AI growth zones and tech towns, we're seeing the investment spread and skills hubs grow across the UK. So the ultimate goal really is to try and ensure that the spread of new roles, skills, capability, and investment is felt evenly across the economy so that we mitigate against those risks. If we could then look at the way that we think it will impact our communities on the next slide, please. Um, the picture here depends entirely on the kind of AI that we're talking about and the different risks surrounding that, in my view. So if we don't look at generative AI, but we look at sort of broader AI, we've already seen there's an acceleration in medical research, breakthroughs in drugs and treatments, and there's been a massive improvement in the availability and the effectiveness of assistive technologies for people with disabilities. For the NHS, for example, there's been a really big impact in mental health support. So AI chatbots increased referrals for NHS talking therapies by 15%, and they critically helped lower barriers for people from minority communities who historically felt more stigma or judgment to seek out help. We've also seen that people who might not have had access because of longer working hours or inability to seek help outside of clinical hours were able to use AI bots outside of those hours and increase the ability of access to care. By automating some of those symptom screenings, the risk flagging, it freed up thousands of clinical hours and it shifted time away from administration to direct patient care. So when we talk about AI in healthcare, there are massive gains and it can be incredibly beneficial. However, I also think when we look at the community impact of AI and we look at more consumer facing AI like ChatGPT or Claude or generative AI in general, the use of AI blended into more of our social media, our news, the way that we embed AI into education and our social lives, we do need to remember that a lot of these systems are designed to maximize engagement and not well-being. We've seen the rise in the number of AI companions that are digitizing human connection. There's also been a risk of accelerating loneliness and isolation. There's been some troubling cases where young people turn to ChatGPT for mental health support. And also platforms like Grok have launched explicitly designed AI companionship features and are sort of encouraging parasocial relationships with AI. And we know that that's not going to help community well-being and that's not necessarily going to drive benefits to our society. There's also really interesting emerging research around the repetitive use of AI and how it will impact our ability to undertake independent research, analysis, and critical thinking. So much like some of those skills we were all just showing Vaishali, we know that we need to make sure we are investing in a variety of educational functions and formats so that young people, especially who are using AI in education, continue to be able to use their brains for creativity and an analytical reasoning and a full cognitive function, not just because it's good for humanity, but the future of AI does also depend on people being able to critically assess the outputs, to understand how it works, to be able to continue to create new data and outputs for AI to then learn from as well. So the two need one another, and we shouldn't outsource cognition to data and software. If we then move on to the environment, so this is where it is a little bit bleak at present. So the hope is that AI has an enormous amount of potential to support climate research, mapping, mitigation, and even reversal. And at present, there is a lot of projects using AI that are making a massive impact positively to drive better understanding and mitigation of climate change. However, we are also now in the UN declared era of global water bankruptcy. So AI didn't cause this, but it will add pressure to a rising concerning issue across the globe. So in England alone, by 2050, there is a projected shortfall of nearly 5 billion litres of water a day. Um, and when you think about that and compare it to AI use of water, a sort of average medium-sized data center can consume the same amount of fresh drinking water as 1,000 households a year. So the fact that we aren't getting to grips with how we better understand and report the usage of water, mitigating the volume of water used in AI and data centers should be a cause for concern. We also know that the impacts of climate change and water distress will vary by region and globally, very much so, will vary. For example, we know that in the UK, there are 28 planned data centres, all that would be served by Thames Water alone. And that would place a significant burden on stretched infrastructure in and around London, for example. So, an understanding of how we can better mitigate this risk would be really, really important to focus on for climatic change. We also know that that is the current use of water for AI, but as climate change continues to increase the frequency of heat waves, we'll need more water to cool down those data centers precisely when water sources are more scarce. And we know that water scarcity is already an economic loss creator in certain regions that face water distress already. And that's just water. So if we look at electricity consumption, data centers already consume around 2.5% of the UK's electricity supply. When we look at land use for data infrastructure, that's increased by 144% since 2022. And we haven't even touched there on the demand for critical minerals, finite resources, and really high risk supply chains. So, in a lot of data infrastructure and hardware, we know that they include cobalt, which is mined in the DRC and has really well documented links to modern slavery. So, when we talk about use of AI, we should have a really good cost benefit analysis understanding of the human and environmental cost to the development of AI, the infrastructure around it, and the impacts it has in our country and broadly across the globe in that global supply chain as well. And then if we look at what businesses should be doing in terms of governance and ethics, we are asking businesses to adopt technologies with still fairly unknown risks in order to remain competitive. And a lot of the governance frameworks are still being created to mitigate those risks whilst adoption is already being taken on. This is both a bit of a cause for tension, but also it means there's a huge amount of scope for people to upskill and innovate in this area and to lead the way as a responsible AI practitioner. We need to make sure that AI systems are fair, that they're audited, that we prevent discrimination across protected characteristics. We need to make sure that businesses ensure that human beings are accountable and responsible for decision making, and that we do not leave the risk to systems. We need to make sure that we are embedding sustainability and responsible business thinking into all of our policies. And we also need to look at who, as AI providers, we are partnering with. Do their values as businesses align to ours? What are they prioritizing? Are they investing in a more responsible supply chain and manufacturing process across the whole of AI? Because if we are as businesses, we should expect the same from our AI providers. And there is a big difference if we compare recent providers handling content around child abuse imagery and others that were really quick to try and mitigate those issues and make sure they had ethical practitioners in place. We should be looking at the providers that we use as well. And then finally, as businesses, we should have an awareness of evolving legislation and safety measures that we can put in place. There is a lot out there in the UK already around ethical AI policy templates, training, and at Atos, we're establishing a variety of programs around that as well. So I can cover a bit more now on what Atos is doing. So we've rolled out responsible AI use training for all of our employees, and we're doing that on a tiered scale. So every year we increase the competency of everybody in our workforce. We have a drive for in-person connection meetings as well across our teams and our partners and our clients. We've set up an AI responsible council and a responsible business forum where we're bringing different issues and we're asking employees to raise concerns that we can discuss that will then impact business investment decisions. Um, we're making sure we partner with experts like business in the community so that we can learn about the evolving legislative environment. We're donating devices, we're building AI literacy training for the community, and we're making sure that in future skills pipeline projects, we're investing in AI proofed career pathways. So we've invested in a centre in Birmingham for apprenticeships, and we're trying to create a circular career pathway and learning pathway that covers a variety of different digital skills as well as AI literacy so that young people have a few trajectories that include working in an AI based world and economy. And we've also looked at how we can engage different charities and community groups around violence against women and girls, and how, as digital businesses, we can look at online safety and online abuse as well. On the modern slavery aspect, we've brought in a partner called Slave Free Alliance that we've brought in membership for, and they're having a critical assessment of our global supply chain and the impacts that we have in AI and in general hardware to make sure that we mitigate against rising modern slavery risks and pressures. Um, and finally, I think quite interestingly, that's the focus as a digital business. But as we sort of hinted to before in Vaishali's questions, there is a lot that we can do around building human capability in an AI world. So we need to think about education in oracy and debating, critical thinking, arts, music, team building, and social and emotional intelligence. We need to make sure that we are funding human connection and making sure that we're working with charities that look at isolation and loneliness, but also are funding community centres, youth clubs, sports clubs, the things that make sure that we continue to build those human-centred skills alongside the digital literacy as well. And we're making sure that we are a part of a variety of advocacy and awareness programs. And I think generally outside of being a digital business, this is something that we should all be looking at as well, to sort of future-proof the next generation as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Julie. Thanks so much for sharing insights around what's happening in this space. Now, let's move on to our next speaker, Angela Halliday. She's the Director of Social Impact at Sodexo. So, Angela, over to you, please.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And good morning, everyone. Yes, so I'm Angela Halliday, Director of Social Impact at Sodexo across the UK and Ireland. However, I have worked across both the corporate and the third sector in my 25 years plus career, dare I say that out loud. My roles have consisted of operations, strategy and growth. However, with each role, I've always had a focus on societal impact at its heart. And like Julie, I'm not techie, but what I would like to do today is come very much from a people and communities angle. So I would like to build on the human aspect that we've heard about so far this morning and look at AI through this lens, because I truly believe it's not a technical topic, but instead it's a people topic. And at Sodexo, everything we do in the social value, impact, social mobility space starts with one clear belief. If people thrive, communities thrive, and businesses will thrive also by harnessing innovation without losing the human focus. So I'd like to talk to you about that and how we make sure technology, especially AI, strengthens that mission rather than works against it. So why does this matter? AI is a human choice. It influences opportunity. And we already know it's shaping our daily life, whether it's how we work, how we learn, how we play, and also equally how we access opportunities. But what's important is this: AI impact isn't automatic. albeit we always talk about automation when we refer to AI, but it's actually shaped by the decisions that each of us makes. So if we design and use AI without thinking about people, we absolutely risk creating systems that are going to widen the inequality we're already seeing within society. However, on a positive, if we do approach AI with intention, with a social impact mindset, then AI does truly become that tool that can open doors, not close them. And again, at Sodexo, social mobility, for example, is absolutely at the forefront of our impact strategy. AI touches that directly, who gets hired, trained, supported, but also who might unintentionally be left behind. And as such, that's why I believe this isn't a technology debate, it's a fairness debate, a human one, as well as a social value, social impact debate. So how do we put people first? The real gap. For me, if we can move on, please. The real gap for me is about confidence of individuals, of businesses. It's about access, and it's about the various levels of understanding. It's not just about the technical skills, being able to work the plethora of AI tools that are out there. It's actually about confidence and the understanding. When we talk about technology, people do often jump to those skills around coding, data science, engineering, all of the things that I don't profuse to understand. But that real gap that we're seeing, not just within our own circles, whether it be our workforce or our communities, it's much more simpler than that. And that lack of confidence, rather, lack of understanding, has absolutely led to the fear of the unknown. It's moving at such a pace that people are actually running in a different direction. And whether this is someone who's, let's say, early in their career, or maybe a frontline worker that's not used to using computers as a key tool to do their job, but for many, it's those that face disadvantage in our communities. And AI can feel like a barrier, not an enabler, that we've already heard this morning that it can be. And we've got to always remember that not all of those voices are heard in our boardrooms unless we bring the voices to the boardroom, to the conversation. And again, at Sodexo, our social impact approach prioritises exactly that. So we look to listen to people that experience the impact, positive and less so, first. We then look at how can we build confidence through practical support and guidance. And we try hard at making sure the AI isn't and doesn't become something that just happens to people, but it's something that works for people. So if these voices aren't shaping AI, then AI simply won't work for them or indeed for our business. And that's where we'll see inequality growing. So how and what approach should we take? Well, I'm a great believer that we should always lead from the front. Responsible intelligence is absolutely a leadership choice. Being a responsible business in the age of AI doesn't actually mean slowing down, which a lot of people fear, a lot of businesses fear. It just means being clear about what kind of future are we creating and who, most importantly, gets to be part of it. And that's where, if AI isn't aligned with social value, we absolutely risk widening inequality, excluding groups who are already facing disadvantage for a number of other reasons. But we'll also lose trust from our employees, from our clients, as well as our communities. So I believe it's our responsibility to make deliberate choices. These choices may be removing bias in data and decision making, creating a culture where people feel safe to learn and adopt these new tools, and ensure that innovation strengthens inclusion instead of weakening it. So being responsible is a leadership choice, and it's one we make every day through our social impact and social mobility commitments at Sodexo. And it also, let's be honest, changes every day. So my final thoughts that I would like to leave you with, and hopefully you reflect and have some comments on, is excuse me, how can we design a future that includes everyone? As we look ahead, the big question that I would ask you to consider is, what future are we designing? Because if we get this wrong, the risks are real. Inequality grows, as I've said, trust fails, and communities will become more divided. But the opportunity in front of us is really powerful. If we put in place people-centred policies, inclusive skill pathways for everyone, not just the elites or those that have got access to digital tools to help with their day-to-day jobs, ensuring that responsible business leadership absolutely comes from the top, but is led by the front line, and taking a balanced focus on both soft skills as well as the necessary technical skills. Leading, any policy that you have around social value, impact, mobility, if you do that with AI being that enabler to support a human, it will absolutely help ensure that people from all backgrounds can access these opportunities and, as we've already talked about, progress. It gives us a great tool to accelerate this mission, if of course we use it well. But let's remember, the real question isn't what AI can do, it's who's it for and who it must never leave behind. So let's support each other in our teams, help our communities build digital confidence, or make sure that we all adopt AI responsibility, not just for our business, but for our communities, as well as our future generations. I believe that AI, as a new innovation, can and must strengthen opportunity for all. If not, they'll replace it. And our people must remain firmly at the heart of everything that we do, that each of us does within our business, but also at home and in life in general. So thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions, reflections and comments. And I'll now hand over to Laura.
Thanks very much, Angela. Brilliant stuff. Hi, everyone. My name's Laura Musgrave. I am the responsible AI lead for CGI UK, and it's brilliant to join you today. This is such an important discussion and such an important topic for many of the reasons that Julie, Angela and Vaishali have all identified there. So a little bit about me, first of all, before we get started. Are the slides visible over on that side? We'll start there first of all. Yeah, okay, fantastic, thank you. We'll get those up. I'll introduce myself in the meantime. So hi, my name's Laura Musgrave, responsible AI lead for CGI UK, and I help organisations to build and use AI systems in a socially responsible way. I also work on AI governance as well, and the risk management side of things, so we will touch on that as we go through today too. I've been working on responsible AI for the last 7 years, both in industry and in the academic world. So it is a topic I'm very passionate about, as you might imagine. I previously worked in user experience research, and in that role, I was leading on both AI and non-AI projects. And that involved working with quite a lot of individuals and communities to understand their relationship with different types of technology, including AI. And that was where I first became interested in how AI was becoming part of our everyday lives and what that meant for us. My background is in digital social science, specialising in responsible AI research. Okay, if we look then at what we're going to cover today on the next slide, we'll be looking at 4 key areas. The first one, biggest question, is where do we even start with this topic? The second question then will be, what about the bigger picture when it comes to AI? So Julie, Angela and Vaishali have all touched on different aspects of this, but I also would love to talk through that part too, because it is so critical. Number 3, we'll be thinking about who is responsible. And this is another big question that comes up whenever we're looking at the topic of AI. And finally, another question, what can we do? This is often one of the key things that people ask me when we start talking about AI is, okay, it's clear that there's a lot of benefits, there's a lot of risk, what can we do? But before we get into all of that, let's start off first of all with the problem. So if we move on, perfectly timed, thank you, to the next slide. So very often when people come and talk to me about AI, they are quite often thinking about the AI tools that you don't necessarily need to be an AI specialist or a data scientist to use. And these types of generative AI tools are far more publicly available now than they have ever been. And as Julie had pointed out, you know, these are part of many people's everyday lives. And this is what many people think of first when the term AI is mentioned, even though there are, of course, many other types of AI, which Julie was kind enough to run through with us. So if we move on to the next slide, so we need an AI tool, or I need an AI tool. This is a really common place to start, thinking about, you know, what AI tools or AI systems are available, what kind should we get? And last year, the Ada Lovelace Institute found that generative AI tools had, if we just go back a bit, sorry. That's it. We'll be here just for a minute. So last year, the Ada Lovelace Institute found that the generative AI had gone mainstream in the UK, with 61% of the British public saying that they had heard of large language models, generative AI, and 40% saying that they had used them. So it's clear even just from that one survey that there's been a lot of rapid adoption around these types of tools since they were sort of made available more widely to the public in 2022. So it's very natural that this is what would come to mind when we're talking about the topic of AI. But if we're starting from this point, we're thinking about, oh, we need an AI tool or we need an AI system. My first questions in response to that would be, okay, interesting. Why do you think that? Or what are you thinking that this AI system would do for you, or this AI tool would do for you? Sometimes in the case of organizations, it might even be a bigger question like, okay, what evidence are you looking at to show that this is needed? And the reason that I would go to those types of questions is because it's important at this stage to take a step back in the process, because if we start here, we can end up down the wrong track pretty quickly. For example, using AI systems where they're not suitable to be used, or for example, where it could have a major impact on people or the environment. So the very first question that it would be helpful to start with would be this next one on the next slide. So first, we need to know, what problem is it that we're trying to solve? We have to start here to work out what the solution is to the problem. It's really worth taking the time to try and understand this before we move on to trying to find the right solution for this problem. So this is a really critical point that I encourage everybody to think about as the start. Whenever we're thinking about AI systems or AI tools, come back to this question first. And the reason for that, if we move on to the next slide, please, is that, of course, AI is great at assisting humans. There are lots of ways that we interact with AI systems of all different kinds every day, from our GPS systems helping us travel around, virtual assistants like Siri or Alexa, for example, perhaps even facial recognition to unlock a phone, recommendations on websites or apps. And Julie mentioned Netflix, which is on the screen here. Also music recommendations, shopping recommendations, and of course the generative AI tools that we've already touched on. So things like ChatGPT Enterprise, Microsoft Copilot, or even Anthropic's Claude as well. So with so many positives when it comes to AI, it can be really easy to assume that AI is always the best tool. But as we've touched on, there are times when AI is not suitable or it should not be used. And we need to be really clear about that. If we want to use AI responsibly, we have to be clear about where we should use it and where not. It then becomes a question of, okay, well, if AI is the answer, or if it's one of the potential answers to the problem that we've got, then we need to be very clear about what type or types of AI we're talking about, because not all of them are, designed for everything. It's not a one size fits all. There are certain types that might be better suited to some problems than others. And we really need to be clear about that as well. Okay, fantastic. So moving on then to the next slide. So in summary, making sure that we have the right solution to the problem is absolutely crucial before we start putting our plans into action. And this saves us an awful lot of money. It saves us a lot of effort on not going down the wrong route, but it also helps to protect us as well as individuals or as an organization, because we're already starting to think about AI in a responsible way. And we're already starting to think about, okay, what are the things we need to consider here? Is this the right approach? And even in the cases where AI is suitable, we need to assess risks and considerations to make sure we can manage it carefully. It is powerful as a set of technologies, but it does need to be used thoughtfully. And really taking this responsible approach helps us to make sure we're using AI systems effectively and responsibly at the same time. Fantastic. Okay, let's move on then to the bigger picture. So once we've figured out that AI is a suitable solution to the problem, we then need to widen the lens a little bit and start looking a little bit wider. And this was exactly what Angela was saying when she was talking about, we need to go a little bit further than just talking about technology. This is a bigger conversation, and I absolutely agree with that. So if we move on to the next slide, so this is the point where it's really important to start thinking about not only what technology or what tools are available, but how do we actually think about AI, holistically? How do we think about AI as a whole picture that considers all the key aspects, not just the technical side of things, not just the technology, but going beyond that as well? And this is a really great opportunity to be having this type of conversation today. I will say as well, it's fantastic to be able to have those types of conversations, to ask questions, share information, share knowledge, and events like today really make that possible. So do make the most of it. So if we move on then to the next one. So that's it. Thank you. Responsible AI helps us to look at the whole picture. So not just the technology side of things, but also the broader aspects of how AI systems are built, how they're used, even how they're governed, and what that means for us. So some of these elements here, if we run through them, if we talk about the social, first of all, we're thinking here about individuals, communities, societies even. We also want to be thinking about sort of all of the different ethical aspects which get mentioned more and more when it comes to AI now, which is, great to see. Things like privacy, bias, transparency, explainability, all of those types of things. We also need to look at the cultural side too. So just as one example of where this might be important is, for example, where AI systems are built in certain areas of the world, those AI systems end up being sort of effectively baked with that culture's goals, languages, or values. But then, of course, those AI systems are quite often getting rolled out globally. And so that brings up some interesting and sometimes important questions around what that means and what impact that has. So that is also part of the picture as well. The environmental side of things also is really crucial, especially with all of the conversations around sustainability. And when it comes to AI systems, we're thinking about lots of different aspects of that, from the water use, as Julie touched on, but also, sort of the energy use, the impact on sort of local areas, where sort of, for example, data centers are and that type of thing. There's also the legal side, the laws, regulations to do with AI. And we have the EU AI Act as one very close to home example, which can also apply to organisations here in the UK. Plus, there are several other laws and regulations in progress or in place around the world. And there are emerging global standards as well, existing and emerging global standards around AI too, which is also worth us taking into consideration. Last but not least then, on the governance and the risk management side, so this is about having the right structure to make sure that we use or build AI systems responsibly. And this is all of those types of aspects, policies, processes, audits that we've already touched on during today as well. So the reason that I bring these up, not just talking about the technology side of things, is because it's really important for us to look at the whole picture, because all of these areas might affect each other. And if we just focus in on one aspect of AI, so for example, regulations is a really common one, we can miss really critical opportunities for both innovation and for risk management. So it's important for us to have a bigger picture on AI. And you might be wondering about the cake aspect of this. So effectively, it's not about sort of one layer of responsible AI. It's about needing the whole cake. So I'm hoping that will be memorable enough for you to take away today. If we move on then to talk about the next question. So a question that very often comes up is, who is responsible for AI? And this is both sort of an easy and a difficult question to answer, but I've done my best to try and sum it up on the next page if we can move across to there. Thank you very much. Okay, so the answer here is really everybody. And Angela made a very good point here in that humans need to stay accountable when it comes to AI systems. It's not a situation where we can sort of pass the responsibility across to the AI systems and say, well, it did X, Y, and Z, and therefore that's on the AI system. It's very much about us. We need to be in control of AI systems, and we need to be accountable for what they do. Now there are different responsibilities, as you can see here. I've listed out some of them, but we've got the individual level. We've got organizations that we're part of. We'll be thinking about the national level and globally as well. Now, there are different levels of responsibility, accountability, power, of course, in all of this, but I think this is really helpful in a lot of ways to think about responsibilities existing at every level, because the good news as part of this is that there is something that each of us can practically do. It's not about leaving it up to somebody else. There is a responsibility or several responsibilities at all levels. So it's really for everyone to be involved in this. Okay, moving on then. So another question that comes up very often is, well, what can we do? That's all very well if we've got all these different responsibilities that exist at these different levels, but what does that mean in practice? And so I wanted to cover some of these for us today as well. So first of all, if we move on to the next slide, we need to take a balanced approach to AI. And you might be wondering, what does that mean? Well, it means accepting, first of all, that AI is not magic. AI systems cannot do everything, and they're not suitable for everything. They're also not human. And that might sound like a strange thing to emphasize, but it is really important that we come back to that point time and time again as a reminder, because sometimes, especially if they are conversational, like a chatbot or, like one of the generative AI tools, they can sometimes do a very good impression of a human. They can sometimes seem very human-like. And the same goes for sort of virtual assistants and voice assistants as well. So they're not human, and that is really important when we think about responsible AI, because there are some things that AI systems will never be able to do that humans can. For example, to live, to think, to experience, to have human experiences is uniquely human. And we need to remember that, and we need to focus on that and keep it in mind as we're talking about AI systems. Equally, on the other hand, and we need to talk about this too, it is also about accepting that there are many benefits that AI systems can bring in some cases. So, for example, they can assist us with speed, convenience, maybe even inspiration. And there are lots of things that AI systems can do that are harder for humans or that humans are not able to do. So it's really about thinking very carefully, what are humans good at and what are AI systems good at? And in that sense, finding a bit of a balance, because ideally we want the humans to focus on what humans are good at, and we want to use AI systems where we can for what AI systems are good at and what they're suitable for. So all of these things can be true. AI is not magic, but equally it can be very beneficial to us in different situations. It's not about either or. You don't have to pick a side. All of those things can be true. Now, if we take a balanced approach to AI, if we accept that there are a lot of benefits that it can bring to us, but also that there are some risks that need to be managed, then it ensures we make the most of the technology, and it makes sure that we're not missing out on any of those opportunities. So I mentioned before that sometimes it's easy if you just focus on one aspect of AI to miss out on opportunities for innovation or opportunities to manage risks. And if we're taking a balanced approach to AI and we're considering the sort of benefits and the risks, we are going to be in the best place to get the most use out of the technology. Okay, if we move on to the next sorry, back one. Thank you. So I wanted to leave you with three. Oh, is there a slide missing? There should be another one. If we can we go back one more? Is there another one before that?
No, that's the last one, Laura.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, okay. Don't worry. I will. We'll continue from here. That's my bad. Okay. So 3 questions to take away in any case. So first of all, thinking about what problem are we trying to solve? That is one of the absolute key questions, and one to come back to time and time again when we're thinking about AI systems. Number 2, is AI the right solution or the right tool for us? So we need to be very clear about that. And that is a direct follow on from asking that question at the beginning of, what problem are we trying to solve? Is AI the right solution for that? Third, have we looked at all of the different aspects? So have we looked at AI in a holistic sense? Have we thought about not only the technology, not only the technical aspects, but also the social, the ethical, the environmental, the legal, and the risk management or the governance aspects? Those are really important. And lastly, we've got responsible AI is critical for innovation. So it's not optional, as has already been said today by Vaishali at the beginning. It is absolutely essential if we want to innovate, if we want to get sustainable long-term value from AI, if we want to make the most of those benefits, we absolutely need responsible AI as the foundation for that. It's not a nice to have, it is a must have. And to be able to enable innovation and also to make sure that we are managing the risks, responsible AI absolutely has to be the foundation for all of that. It is absolutely key. With all of that said, thank you very much for listening, and I'm looking forward to speaking with you on your questions.
Thank you. Thanks, Laura, for sharing your views and what's happening in this space. Now let's move on to a panel session, and it's the most interesting part of this session today. What we will ask is all our speakers, if you can please come on the camera, we will start our panel discussion. So for this round, what we have done, we have consolidated a list of questions, of course, looking at what our participants would like to learn more today in this session, or the responses they are looking around certain unanswered questions. And of course, bringing our research together and thinking about the space of responsible AI. So my first question, it's more from a governmental standpoint. And I think it was last week when our UK Minister for AI and Online Safety, he was there in the AI Impact Summit, and he shared the vision for UK and the AI side of things. And he was quite focused around how AI can work for startups, how AI can work for our communities. And that's the impact side, responsible side that we are talking today. So our first questions, maybe if we can start with you, Laura, is how should the government shape frameworks for socially responsible AI without hindering innovation and progress? Because when we talk about AI, we need to think about progress and innovation and all the good things, but how we can put responsible AI into picture when looking at these frameworks.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. I really feel that this leads directly on from what I was just talking about at the end there, which is it's really important to be clear that socially responsible AI isn't in opposition to innovation. It's actually crucial to be able to enable innovation and also to be able to unlock investment because it reduces uncertainty. It makes it clear that we're looking at the risks, that we're managing the risks, and that we're thinking about where, sort of AI is most appropriate to be used. And having responsible AI at the heart of it really ensures that we are going to get, sustainable long-term value from AI, and that we're also going to manage those risks. So I think if we're looking at sort of frameworks and what we would need to have on that side of things, it's really about looking at AI in a balanced way. So thinking about the benefits and the risks, and having a holistic view that goes beyond what's just technically possible, but also, bearing in mind at the speed that AI technology can develop at, we also need to make sure that whatever we're developing as a framework or as regulation ensures that we are covered for where this technology is moving to, or that we can update it as that progresses.
Brilliant. Julie, what are your views around this?
I would echo that, and also if we want to maximize the benefit of AI, we need people to use it. And if people don't have any trust in it, they're not going to use it. There's already been a disparity in trust of different AI systems and trust in users, and then a skew of what representation of users there are. So we need to address it if we actually want the innovation and the benefits of AI to be felt. So I also think there is something to be said that unless there is pressure from government, unless there's pressure from big businesses who are procuring large contracts with providers, it probably won't move the dial that quickly. I think especially around things like safety for vulnerable users who are always underrepresented in legal and legislative change, and especially for things like the environment, which we all know has sort of been slightly deprioritized over the last few years. If there was a way for government to lead the way and for large businesses to put pressure on the big AI providers and suppliers, I think that would make a massive difference. And I think making sure that users who have been left behind or who have been the subject of some of the more concerning aspects of AI to be part of the conversation when they create the legislation is really key as well.
And Julie, maybe you mentioned about the procurement side of AI and thinking about sustainability when you were presenting. So maybe if we want to explore this concept, that how procurement can be done specifically around AI tools, and how we can bake in sustainability within that procurement element.
So this isn't my full area of expertise, obviously, but when we procure large programs, tools, software, anything large that we do through procurement, we have an ESG weighting in that procurement process. And we look for a baseline of maturity across certain factors like environmental maturity, modern slavery risk, security. And I think we need to put the same scrutiny on AI licensing and use as we would other big projects, because it will impact all of those areas. And whilst it might not be our direct impact, that sort of supply chain impact that it has is quite serious and severe if it's not well managed and maintained. And I think as responsible businesses, we should look at that with the same scrutiny as we would something else.
Laura, any views around this procurement side of AI?
I think Julie's probably covered all the points that I would have touched on. So yeah, happy to move on to the next question.
Brilliant, thanks. Angela.
Yeah, I was just going to kind of add, and dare I just bring it back to that people focus. As a large strategic supplier to government, our voice is really critical in helping shape the framework. Government are having to move at pace alongside the rest of us. So we've got a responsibility also to ensure that the government kind of set very clear expectations around fairness, accountability, but also leave space for organisations to innovate, in the ways that can genuinely improve lives, communities and the planet. Because when you focus on the outcomes that you're intending as a result of AI, good people engagement, innovation certainly follows. So I think using our voice wisely with government, particularly where you have that opportunity, is absolutely critical. Sorry, I just thought I'd jump in there.
Yeah. And Angela, just following on this concept, of course, we think about social value. And let's think about social value in AI, thinking about PPN 002, where, most of our procurement authorities and contracts, they include that kind of a 10% weightage. But now technology taking a place here, where do you see social value moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because if we do look at the PPN 2 social value model, it's all about improving life chances for people within our communities, particularly if we do the kind of people focus for a minute. So it's about how does businesses create access to opportunity? How do they make sure equity within communities, treat people and communities with dignity? All of the stuff that human beings, it's at the heartbeat of who we are. But then how does that translate when you're looking to deliver, particularly within a procurement framework? At the moment, it's not visible because it's all about that manual human input. And again, I think there's a bit of an evolvement yet to come. And I do believe that we'll see that over the next year, 2 years, not maybe as quickly as some of us would actually like. But whilst we're waiting for it to evolve to that position, we've got to help shape it. Going back to, the point that it's not just about experts and businesses doing it, but listen to our employees, speak to our communities, get into schools and speak to young people or colleges, whatever it might be. Those individuals with lived experience of inequality will absolutely help shape this framework for the government and then help the continued evolvement, I believe, of the social value model.
Brilliant, Angela. Julie, anything from your side?
I was also going to say, I think what's really cool is for social impact, AI can be used to pinpoint need really, really well now. So there's tools. So we use a tool called Thrive to measure social value and the impact we've generated. They've created an AI needs analysis tool that maps all of the indices of multiple deprivation by postcode. They map overlaying data around indicators of health and well-being. So as practitioners, we can also then use data and AI to say, well, what does that community need statistically as well if you are like us and operate UK wide? And you can say, well, we now have a project in this area. What more can we do? How can we really target our support to maximize benefit? And it maps it to different areas of social value as well. So yeah, so I think there's different aspects of it as well. But Angela answered that really well beforehand, so I probably won't add more than that.
Oh, brilliant. Let's stick to this point around social value. And again, in this AI space overall, we talk a lot about upskilling and providing skills to our communities. And most of the questions I think we see, within the projects that we do and interacting with suppliers and clients, what skills we are talking here? Are we talking about, developing an AI model, which is a different story, but thinking about communities, our people and supply chain, what skills should people like us or, our participants can upskill themselves? So what will be your view here? Laura, anything from your side?
Yeah, I think this is really crucial, and it perhaps touches on a few of the questions in the Q&A. I haven't had a chance to go through those yet, but I think the first thing really is knowledge to begin with. You don't need to be a data scientist, you don't need to be an AI specialist, you don't necessarily need to know how to build an AI system. But the things that are really helpful to understand are just at a very basic level, what are, sort of different types of AI technologies, even if you just split them out into two groups: traditional AI, which is more the sort of categories that Julie was talking about, and then generative AI, and that's the sort of area most people are familiar with when it comes to AI. Understanding, kind of what AI is really helpful, and some of the basics about, if you're using, for example, like generative AI tools, what types of things do you need to look for or be aware of when you're using those tools, particularly when we're thinking about what we're putting into the tools and what we get back out of them. I think that really helps as a foundation. And then if you want to then use AI tools as well, it also helps to understand some of the sort of basics around, for example, how do you write an instruction known as a prompt? How do you write those effectively for like a generative AI tool, and some of the basics around that. So I think that essentially at the beginning it's about knowledge before anything else, and an AI awareness, I would say, to begin with, what it is, what it can do, and yeah, and then more about how to actually use the tools if that's something you want to do.
So, Laura, from your side, knowledge and AI awareness. Angela, anything from you?
Yeah, I would just build on that, because from knowledge comes confidence. And I mentioned that earlier, that it's actually confidence that is the biggest barrier, because, you know, whether it's the confidence of a young person or a more mature person, everyone's got the ability to use it, but they don't necessarily have the confidence. So I think we almost need to dumb it down a little bit, even though it's the sexiest, most innovative thing in our lifetime. But we actually have to think about dumbing it down, because it's very complex. But there's a danger we make it even more complex, which again will just turn people off from it. So I think with the knowledge piece, absolutely, let people know that it's actually not scary. You know, pull back that curtain and let them look behind. It's actually not that scary, but there's more positives than negatives. And I don't think that's helpful at the moment because of the negative PR that's been out there. You know, let's be honest, and we've already touched on some of those negative elements of late. So that's actually made people more fearful of using AI. And interestingly, particularly within the young generation, because of some of the stories that's coming out. So how do we rebuild or almost re-educate as we go along at the speed of lightning in order to build that confidence? So I would totally agree. It starts with knowledge, and then the trust, the confidence, accessibility, everything else comes along with it. Because a real danger for me is if people do continue to stand back from it, you know, they're going to lose what is now the norm in terms of social connectivity. You know, in the good old fashioned days, it was human to human, you know, in the room with each other. That's just not today's world, and it's certainly not tomorrow's. But so one of the key ways of keeping that social connectivity will absolutely be through using these type of tools, using technology as a whole. And that's a huge risk from an isolation point of view, mental health, etc. So it's a really fine balance. But if we educate, we'll be able to engage and then hopefully enable and empower people to use AI to the best that they want to use it.
Thank you, Angela. So from your side, what we are taking is confidence and trust. That will be the key pillars around, upskilling and skilling our people. Julie, anything from you?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think also we're trying to get a bit of a view from, we work with a training provider in the community and we want to do different skills training programs depending on what the need is. But interestingly, they've also told us the difference in confidence or concerns or skills gaps are different by different groups. So they were saying actually, like a lot of young people are really AI literate because they're using it all the time. They are an AI generation. It tends to be people who are older or who have had time out of the workforce or are in a less AI mature sector. And then there's differences of need based on demographic area, sector, etc. So we're trying to look at how we can package different types of training depending on different skill levels or desires. And some of it, like you said, it's some of the need is more you have confidence to talk about and understand AI, but you don't need to use it in your job. And others is you will need to understand AI to do the future of your job. So it's quite different depending on the person and their experience as well.
Brilliant. Moving from here, of course, what we have discussed so far is the people side of things around AI. We spoke a little bit about the planet impact somehow, what will be the environmental impact with having more data centers and so on, the progress side of things around AI. Now let's think about, how can companies integrate responsible AI principles into their business policies effectively? Because People, planet, progress, somehow they don't go hand in hand in all realities, but how progressive companies can work towards it, to work towards a kind of a responsible AI world. Anyone would like to start over here?
I'm happy to start. I think it really is helpful to come back, first of all, to what are your principles as an organization? So what are you, specifically around AI? Because we want to be thinking about what AI means for you as an organization. What is it that is important for you, whether that's around the sort of benefits or the risks? And to sort of start there as a starting point. It's also really important to think about the governance side of things before the technology side of things. That's because as soon as you start introducing sort of AI systems into the organization, you're already at a point where you're having to try and manage risks. So if you can start to think about the sort of the governance and begin to consider effectively what are the risks for you as an organization, and look at things. I think Angela mentioned at some point about assessments, so looking at having in place AI risk and impact assessments, for example, looking at sort of what types of AI you have, what type of testing you might want to have, how it links to audits, for example, for your organization, and that may tie in with sort of sustainability or other programs you already have in place. But all of those things are important. So it's helpful to think about building on your existing processes. So quite a lot of organizations already have some things in place, be it data privacy or security. Some even sort of have sustainability or social value programs as well, but we don't only want to focus on those when we're thinking about AI. So sometimes it's really tempting to kind of zone in on the areas that we already know, but we want to sort of build on those and look at, okay, specifically for AI, what does this mean for us as an organization, and what do we need to have in place? And if we approach it from that practical angle, it's less about sort of the sort of high level principles, and actually about how does this practically work for us? What does it mean to embed that?
Brilliant. Angela?
Yeah, I was just going to add on to that. I totally agree, because I think by treating responsible AI as a people and culture issue as opposed to a compliance exercise, that's where we absolutely start to shift the dial. And it takes us back to that responsible leadership piece. That's behaviours, not policy. So again, that's about the culture. So in short, I think today what we've got to do is treat AI exactly the same way we do with health and safety, well-being, all the policies and practices that we've been very comfortable with for decades. The AI has to be embedded in the way in which we do work, and we need to treat it with the same respect we do for things like safety and well-being, rather than trying to, again, overcomplicate it or sit it to the side as something unique. It's part of our day-to-day lives in business now, so let's treat it that way.
Brilliant, I think, Angela. Julie, something
But just,
from you?
I think
Yeah.
both answered brilliantly. Yeah, I would echo their points. And I think having a really clear alignment of what it is, as Laura sort of said, your business ambitions, goals, and values are, and aligning that to all business practices, including AI, and having processes in place to raise risks and change things if they don't align, is the key to it. But yeah, I would echo what they said.
Brilliant. And just following on from this conversation, we are thinking about purpose-driven companies who are thinking about responsible AI. What about the risks involved? Because again, as companies, we are talking a lot around financial risk and other kind of risk. What about societal risk within the space of AI development? Angela, would you like to start?
Yeah, of course. So I'll probably just reiterate what I said earlier, because I do think it's so obvious. And it's about the biggest risk, frankly, is about locking in inequality. We're already living in a world There's lots of inequality and it's growing depending on who's in power where, but we won't go there. But inequality is absolutely prevalent within our communities and there's a lack of trust in institutions, whether it's government, whether it's other authorities. And those gaps at the moment are continuing to widen. And putting AI into the mix is, for me, one of the biggest risks because people are starting to feel that things are getting done to them, decisions are being made on their behalf, but not with them. And again, that goes back to that whole piece around, isolation, lower social connectivity, etc. We need more human to human interaction whilst we develop and learn to live with AI. Because the most important thing, after air, water, and food, of course, is human connection. So that's one of the biggest risks because who knows where AI is going to go? We end up going to have a future generation that don't even need to leave home to go to work. And it's not because of a pandemic, but it's because of the tools that are available to them to do their day job. That's a worry. Now, obviously, it won't overtake a lot of jobs, and Laura touched on that earlier, but there are going to be a high percent of jobs that there's an opportunity. There's a risk that people will back off from human to human connections. And that to me is probably the thing that scares me the most about the risks associated with this moving forward.
Julie, yeah.
I was going to say, if I could add to that, I also think the difficulty in this area always tends to be how you can translate like a human impact and a societal impact into a business risk. So, like why as a business is it a risk to displace loads of workers and change your employment model? Why is it as a business a risk to fund a business that might not have value alignment? And I think making that connection is cynically probably the bit that's helped most in the conversations we've had. So talking about, well, if you hire a lot less entry-level roles, who in future will be the people that run all these systems, test all these systems, who develop other things alongside AI? You need to continue to build a future pipeline and invest in it, even if it's in the short term more of an investment than someone that you can pay and deploy onto a service, because otherwise your future business talent pipeline is at risk. And so it's like trying to make cynically all the connection of, for example, we were talking about why is it important to make sure that the AI suppliers that we use have really strong value alignment? Well, it's also an operational risk if they are aligned to, again, a government who at some point may pose a geopolitical risk, because if they have access to your data and your systems, they could put your operations at risk. So value alignment actually is important for operational security and all those sorts of things. So for us trying to frame a lot of and again, if you don't have young people included in the design of AI, then your future programs that use AI won't include them, and then you miss out a huge user profile and it will cause a problem with the system, etc. So it's trying to map all the different things that we should care about, but also as a business risk to make it a priority again, because I think sometimes when these things come up, it's the short-sightedness of how do we make the most money and how do we be the most innovative and how do we do things fastest and first, but it's trying to also then make those things a business priority too. But yeah, so I think that's for us where we're trying to get to with our AI Council and our like responsible business forum, is how do we translate all those things into real tangible business costs and risks that they need to take into account in the same way they would profit margin or something like that.
I think the main key takeaway over here is how we can keep these discussions alive, because we have not seen all the risk within this, journey around AI and AI development. But we need to have these discussions. And Julie and Angela, the way you have mentioned, we need to have more forums. We need to have these conversations. We might like certain conversation, we might not like it, but we need to have these conversations with young people and different community members and so on, and find the right solution. Laura, any thoughts around societal risk around AI developments?
It's a very big question, isn't it? Where do you even start with that one? Societal risks. I think we obviously have to factor that in, and I think coming back to what Angela was talking about earlier on, is that is a really critical part of this conversation. It's not just about sort of thinking about this as a technology question, but we also want to be sort of considering the societal side of things. In terms of the risks to society, there are sort of, I'm trying to even think where we would start to unpack this. There's quite a lot. I think what sort of Angela had mentioned about people who are impacted being part of that conversation is important, and thinking about how that can happen and where there's opportunities for that to happen is really crucial. And yeah, factoring all of those questions in is really important as a whole picture approach. So not we do need to think about the sort of societal risks of AI, but we also need to think about it in the context of all the other questions as well, around sort of the sort of environmental side, the legal aspects, and so on. So yeah, really important, but as part of a bigger picture.
Absolutely. And maybe my next question is quite complex and a kind of a hard-hitting question, because what I've been reading around AI data and data biases around AI is that wherever AI has been used so far, specifically thinking about recruitment practices and different practices, there have been not so good scenarios where, of course, the data, the historical data, it tells a different story at times. And the way we are progressing, this might not be the right way, looking at our society dynamics and so on. So, again, maybe your reflection, your insights around how the data should work and how we can avoid AI biases in the system. Anyone would like to jump in on this?
I'm happy to sort of follow on from there. So bias is obviously one of the sort of key considerations when we're talking about AI systems. In some cases more than others. It is something that we need to be looking very carefully at in terms of thinking about how do we test for it, how do we monitor it. One of the sort of key things that I would emphasize is that bias is very often amplified in AI systems. It's not just a reflection of existing biases, but it also can be amplified and is amplified in AI systems. It's also important to think about the fact then that we can reduce the risk of bias, but we can't remove it completely. And I think that underscores how important it is to actually look at that risk and take action on it. So, as I mentioned, sort of being aware of it, thinking about how we test different forms of AI for that, and knowing what we can do in terms of even at an individual level of what we're putting into AI systems, what we're getting out, and what we need to look for. So a lot again to unpack with that one, but yeah, a very crucial topic that we need to act on.
Thank you. Julie?
I think another thing that would be amazing is to continue working to get more representative teams in technical AI roles and more representation of different users. We worked with a company that works with young girls across the UK, and they said there's definitely a disparity in the usage of AI between different demographics, but also more men use AI than women apparently at the moment within that sort of age group. And even that will then impact what it's learning on going forward. So making sure that we try and sort of mitigate ongoing biases as well, I think would be brilliant. And making sure we have more representation in technical roles, I think is absolutely key to that. So yeah, training, acceleration, and getting more people into that sort of role base would be something that I think we need to focus on.
Great point, Julie. Angela?
Yeah, I'll just add, let's not forget our values as humans and as businesses. And if you've already got a positive culture in place, then maintain, elevate that culture in a way that we can mitigate against the technology that potentially might shift our culture, our values through that automated system, whether it's, sifting CVs or whatever it might be. But if your culture and your values are strong, then you should be continuously monitoring and looking at ways to almost override the technology to make sure it stays true to thyself, as Shakespeare would say.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. Last question, but we would like to end on a positive note. Of course, we are testing the flip side of this responsible AI journey. What will be your thoughts as industry experts around how AI can work in our benefits and for us actually? In what ways actually AI can help us solve certain urgent issues, be it, climate change, be it the geopolitical situation within supply chain disruptions, and so on. So, what are the use cases you have seen within the AI world?
There's quite a lot again, which is positive, as you say, and that is important to talk about too. Again, coming back to that balanced approach to AI. So I think this is, again, one of the areas where we can look at what I was referring to earlier, in terms of what are humans good at and what is AI good at. And there are a lot of ways that different AI technologies can be used, for example, to help identify patterns in very large data sets that would take a very long time for a human to go through. So, for example, to identify changes in specific areas. So just as sort of some examples, so for example, in the climate sort of change space, we can be thinking about, help with forecasting different sort of scenarios, and for example, like tracking sort of emissions in supply chains, those types of things. We can also look at the health side of things. So what type of predictions would be useful for public health, for example, and that may inform next steps, be that sort of policies, or be that some type of support that needs to be available. So lots of different ways that AI technology can help us, particularly when we're looking at data, we're trying to identify patterns, or we're trying to predict something, or trying to forecast, or trying to model different scenarios. This is where AI can really be beneficial to us.
Julie, Angela, who would like to go next? Julie?
I'm happy to. Yeah, I think also on a sort of less strategic scale, it's given a lot of people a lesser barrier to creating their own businesses, or because you can now use AI to help you create a website and reduce the barriers to sort of creating an online product, or all those sorts of things. It helps really small teams that historically might have had to do all of the administrative part of their role on their own. It reduces all of that time and enables them to spend their time doing much more interesting work. So I think in terms of, there's also a lot of use for people with different neurodiverse conditions, being able to use AI as like an educational assistant and to better understand. For example, we found a partner that does mind mapping by basically listening in on certain information and helping people with ADHD to mind map different concepts, because they found it was more useful for them to take in information in this way than in a written sort of set format. So there's loads of small scale innovations as well that it can be used for that wasn't possible before in real time. So those are a few examples I enjoy.
Thank you. Angela?
Yeah, so personally, I love the fact that it tidies up my inbox for me and helps me find emails quicker. That's as far as my AI experience goes. But it goes back to something Julie said, because we also use like demographic profiling so that we can really pivot to meet needs. So I think AI can absolutely help businesses and us to target support more effectively. So whether that's healthier communities, greener operations, better access or more access to jobs, all of this is, an enabler, but it's still got to be people and purpose driven. And Julie, you mentioned there about giving you more time to do more interesting work. I would like to say that by using AI, because we can do things so much quicker in our work life, actually maybe we will get better work-life balance moving forward. Because we don't spend now, 2 hours trawling through our emails, but actually we can get AI to do it in 10 minutes. Therefore, giving us time as human beings to put a bit more focus on our own self-care, well-being and connectivity. So targeted support, more time, but more time to live our lives. I think that's pretty exciting from an AI perspective.
Angela, thank you so much. I mean, you have ended this panel discussion on a positive note in a way how
Yes.
AI can make our life easier, right? And it's about we don't need to, scare around what is happening in the AI space. It's for us, and we need to make it work for us. That's what we need to do within this partnership. Thank you, three of our speakers, for your amazing, amazing thoughts and insightful reflections over responsible AI. Uh, Last few thoughts about Supply Chain Sustainability School. As you know, we are a training platform. You can access our training without any cost on our Supply Chain Sustainability School. And just to wrap up our discussion today, I think by keeping humans in the driver's seat and leveraging AI as a true collaborative partner, we are not just automating tasks, we are unlocking smarter and, faster ways of working, as our all the three speakers have mentioned within, their talks. And the future of our work is definitely human plus AI. So we need to partner with AI, and to thrive we must learn to partner with AI, understand its capability, our capability, and embrace it as an enabler and not fear it. That's the biggest key takeaway from today's session. Lastly, just a request from our participants. We would love to hear your feedback about this session, but also your feedback, what you would like to hear more from these AI sessions, be it responsible AI and AI specific topics around ethics and so on. So thank you so much for your time, for your engagement and thoughtful contributions today. Our joint curiosity, insights, and willingness to explore this, human AI collaboration will shape the future we all want for us. So thank you. Thanks to everyone for participating today. Thank you.